Hey MennoNerds, it's Curtis, and I want to talk to you about raising kingdom kids. William started off this discussion as he talked about going to a number of different church services and just sort of observing the roles that children play in it, which led him to ask questions about how does one raise kingdom children. And I think it's interesting that I'm the next person to speak to that because, one, I don't have any children. I've never parented. I'm not married, which makes me feel a little unqualified to speak to this topic. And the second thing that makes it interesting is that in some ways, maybe I'm closer to childhood than I am to adulthood. Seeing that I'm just finishing up my last year of my undergraduate education puts me in this interesting middle ground where there's much that I have yet to live and experience that I can't speak to. And yet there is enough that I've lived and experienced that maybe wouldn't necessarily put me at a child. So I stand in this middle ground attempting to ask this question to myself. How do you raise a kingdom kid? So just to preface this, I don't think I'm necessarily that qualified. So I look forward to other people's takes on this discussion, MennoNerd vloggers, what you think. But here's what I will say. Here's what I thought as I listened to William. I think if I'm going to raise a kingdom kid, where that's going to start is asking myself, how do people come into the kingdom? Whether they are 4 or 40, what's that process? And I've slowly become more and more convinced that the way that the kingdom grows and the way that God does that is not by coercion and force, but by rather love. You know, it's not this power over sort of method, but rather this service under method that leads people into the kingdom. I talk to people and I say no one gets argued into the kingdom of God. No one gets shamed into the kingdom of God or forced into the kingdom of God. I think we can only be loved there. So starting from that premise, I would say that raising kingdom children starts with loving children into the kingdom. Now, don't misunderstand me. I'm not talking about a parenting approach where everything's just a-okay and there's like a hands-off, I'd rather just be their friend and not their parent sort of method. That's not what I mean. I think that rebuke and discipline is important. I think of Hebrews where the author says, if we don't experience discipline, then we are an illegitimate child because the Father disciplines those whom he loves. So I think along with loving a child comes a discipline in a loving, caring sense. I think that's important. And I think that as parents attempt to move in that direction with their child, I think the most important thing that they can do is simply to embody and live out the kingdom in Jesus before them. And I say this because although I don't have experience being a father, I do have an experience being a child. And I can think of a number of behaviors within myself that I have simply because it was modeled and lived in front of me by my parents. So I can think of a lot of different character traits that I appreciate that I have, and I know I have because of them just being displayed to me all the time. However, I can think of negative traits that I see within myself that I wish I didn't have or I wasn't given to doing, and they're there simply because they were lived before me by my parents consistently. So to sum it all up and answer the question, when it comes to raising a kingdom kid, I think we need to think about how does Jesus bring people into the kingdom? I think that's by love. I think that's by sacrifice. And I think that's by modeling the kingdom perfectly before us. And so parents, from my non-authoritative perspective, because I just don't know, the closest I can get to is knowing what was modeled before me has become what I am in a lot of different ways. And so I think that's where we need to start when approaching this topic. I'm interested to hear other perspectives from older parents or even older non-parents. I'm excited to see where this goes. Until next time, grace and peace.